what adds to the significance of this, not only was Eliza James and Elizabeth Monroe's daughter, but she played a pivotal role in the 8 years when James Monroe was president. Her parents doted on her. They took a personal interest in her education. Monroe himself taught her science and math and history because he wanted her to be able to participate in conversations. And I think that part of his goal was not to make her into the perfect early 19th century American hostess, but to educate her as a whole person. When the Monroes were abroad, when Monroe was serving various administrations as ambassador, Elizabeth's health began to fail. She developed long-term health issues, and by the time Monroe got to the White House, her health was in serious decline. Not only was she fragile in her constitution, but she had what they call the fainting sickness, which we now identify as epilepsy. And it was a tough role to follow because she came in right after Dolly Madison. Yeah. And Dolly Madison was a doors open, the perfect hostess, the open the doors wide, welcome everyone. And then Elizabeth came in with health issues and, of course, with the negative connotations that were attached to epilepsy at the time. The Monroe family wanted to shield her from embarrassing situations or situations that could compromise her reputation. So as the Monroe administration progressed, Eliza took on more and more the responsibilities of hostess. And she did this at the behest of James Monroe and Elizabeth. And there was a great deal of resentment because Eliza was very protective of her mother's space. She took on that role amid multiple criticisms from not only the Washington elite, but also the diplomatic corps. Yet she stood her ground, and she received a lot of vitriolic criticism because of the paring down of the White House social agenda.
People in their pursuit of history, whether they do it seriously as scholars, whether they do it as educators who want to be able to impart knowledge to students, or whether it's people who just have an interest in the past, they connect best to it through human stories. And this is the most human story possible. This is the absolute fundamental birth, life, death episode here. And this is the last installment in some ways of that in Eliza Monroe Hay's journey. And you know, she did not have a town named after her. She didn't have a memorial other than where her remains were or will be. But she had an impact. She had a life. She was part of a distinguished family. She played her roles, sometimes with conflict, sometimes not. But the fact that she can complete a journey that began here in the Fredericksburg area, 1786, and for 200 years had probably the longest in-flight delay that you can imagine before finally getting back. I just think it's a fascinating process. It's a fascinating story. It helps us connect better to the past.
I think she was much maligned. I think part of the reason that this is an important event is not only to set the record somewhat straight and make it more balanced about who Eliza was, and also to bring focus to her dedication, her sacrifice to serve as First Lady. But she did have her bright and good points. She must have been a terribly strong woman who had the strength of her convictions and was not shy about voicing them. Yet she does deserve recognition and not forgotten in perpetuity in an unmarked grave in Paris. So part of what is so wonderful about this is that Eliza by far was not the only woman in the 19th century who had no legal standing in court, who had no real champion, and who was wronged. Evidence of women who had inherited and never allowed to access their inheritance was not an uncommon story. And so in rehabilitating Eliza's reputation and by shining on her good parts, we are in a sense part of the, how shall I say this, advocacy for women.
I mean, you can't look at a better example of how knowledge of the past and the tools of research, of communication, of advocacy can be employed to not just illuminate something that happened a long time ago, but can have a direct contemporary relevance. And I think it's, again, it is showing that history is alive. I think it was, wasn't Hemingway, it was Faulkner who said that the past isn't dead, it's not even past. And I think there's a great example of that.